So with that, we will bring the meeting together for our, well, if you could all bear with me, how's this? Welcome to our June 22nd, 2020 electronic meeting of the City Council. We are meeting electronically due to the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020 number 04. Please note that in accordance with the Governor's Emergency Order, we have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing this meeting. Instructions are provided on our agenda at the City of Concord website at concordnh.legstar.com/calendar.aspx. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the City Council have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting, and the public has access to listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through clicking on the following website address: us02web.zoom.us/j/86861843671. If any member of the public does not have a website access, they may dial the telephone number 929-205-6099. If dialing from a landline, you may call in toll-free at 877-853-5257. The webinar ID number is 868-6184-3671. We will not be using the chat function in this Zoom for this meeting. Please note that testimony is only allowed for agenda items that have been scheduled for a public hearing, and the public participation is not authorized for any other items of this agenda. If anyone has a problem accessing this meeting, please call 603-230-4619 or send an email to citycouncilmeeting@concordnh.gov. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn from the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let us start the meeting by taking roll call attendance. When you state your presence at the meeting, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Madam Clerk, if you may please call the roll.
Councillor Bouchard.
Here, alone, and I'm at home.
Mayor Bullen.
I am in my office and I am alone.
Councillor Champlin.
I am at my home in a room, and there was no one in the room with me.
Councillor Fennessy.
I'm here. I'm in a room by myself.
Councillor Brady Sexton.
So, for the time being.
I did not hear her. I'm guessing she said she's by herself.
Can you hear me?
You know what? The volume or the microphone seems to be garbled a little bit. I'm not sure why.
It's a bad internet connection. That's what that sounds like. It's probably going in and out.
She looks like she's alone. We're going to go.
She's alone for the moment, though one of the kids might walk through.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Councillor Hatfield.
I'm here at home in a room by myself.
Councillor Keach.
Home alone.
Councillor Kennison.
Home in a room by myself.
Councillor Kretovic.
I'm home in a room by myself, though my husband might walk through.
Councillor Matson.
I'm here at my home alone.
Councillor Nye.
Present at home. My son Joe is in the same room.
Councillor Pierce.
Present. I am home alone.
Councillor Rice Hawkins.
Present, alone in this room at home.
Councillor Todd.
Here at home, alone in this room.
And Councillor Werner.
Here alone in this room at home.
Great. Good to see everyone. Appreciate taking this Monday, beautiful night to be with us. A reminder for the public, if you have any questions or any trouble accessing this meeting, please call 603-230-4619 or send an email to citycouncilmeeting@concordnh.gov. Reminder to the council members, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Please click the raised hand icon in the participants section of your Zoom screen. Also, if viewing in the gallery view, wave your hand in front of the camera to make sure that you are heard. If you are in the Zoom screen, change your view to the upper right corner from speaker view to gallery view to see all panelists. So we have concluded all the formalities. Tonight's, Madam Clerk, if you want to read item 3 and then we'll go from there.
Yes. It's a communication from Councilor Rice Hawkins requesting City Council consider making a formal statement condemning racism and police brutality. There was also a communication received from Councilor Nyan, Councilor Kretovic, and one from Mayor Boulay.
Thank you very much. So does everyone have the email that Jenna sent with the 4? Okay, great. So I have been thinking about this all day, trying to figure out what would be the best way to proceed. And I thought that there may be some other proposals that somebody who didn't submit something they may have as well. But I thought that if we start with Councilor Rice Hawkins, if you want to kick this off, and then if Councilor Nyan, if you want to share a few of your thoughts, and Councilor Kretovic, and then I will go as well, and anybody else wants to jump in. But that way, just put a little structure and order to it so that we don't just keep jumping around, and give everybody a chance is what I was looking to do. So unless somebody can think of a better way, which I guess Councilor Hatfield does think of a better way. So Councilor Hatfield, what do you have?
Thanks. No, I definitely don't have a better way. I just wanted to ask about public input and what your thought was about if and when we might let people speak, and if you could just speak to that.
So this is under new business, and it's not scheduled a public hearing. And during this phase, we typically do not seek public input. But if you want to postpone this to do a public hearing at some later date, then that's the council's prerogative. Councilor Champlin?
I may be off base, Your Honor, but I would just like to say that I kind of like using Councilor Nyan's version as a base document. It has a lot of the components of Councilor Rice Hawkins' document, which I like very much. I like some aspects of yours as well as Councilor Kretovic's. But my experience in trying to put together a document by committee is that it's always good to start with a base document and kind of add or subtract from that.
I generally concur, but I thought since the 4 of us all took the time to draft something to try to send out, that I would just at least like to give the opportunity for everybody just to take a minute or so to talk a little bit what they've done. And then I think the next thing would be to pick something to start with and work from. It might be the best thing. So I do appreciate your input. I think we're pretty close. So Councilor Hatfield, did you want to follow up, or do you think we should have a public hearing afterwards, or?
Thank you very much. I mean, I think that consistent with a lot of the comments we've received, time is of the essence. So I would hate to postpone this further. I think if we could do it over again, maybe we would do the timing differently, but I'm not seeking to delay it. I really appreciate the folks who've taken the time to email. I do think it's unfortunate for the folks who've called in tonight that they're not going to be able to share thoughts. So I'm a little torn, but I really don't want to delay it any further.
Okay. My concern sometimes, we just want to make sure we properly notice things to be as transparent as we possibly can. And there may have been somebody who did not choose to dial in tonight because they didn't think they were going to be able to get public access. And I would hate to see somebody not have joined us tonight and hear that they couldn't. So I guess we could err on one side or the other, but I'd rather err on the side of transparency and inclusive.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, if anybody else has anything like to share, I'd like to recognize Councilor Rice Hawkins, and you could kick it off. Does that sound good?
Good to me. So thank you. I won't take a lot of the time because I had an opportunity, obviously, to introduce this last week. But just to reflect a little bit again, it's really important. I think we've heard from a lot of people in the community that they'd like to make sure that we are making a clear and direct statement about what's going on in our country, and also that we're doing the work to look at where our community stands and where there's areas for improvement. I think it's really important that we listen to the voices of Black leaders and other people of color about what their experiences have been and what they're asking us to do. So to that end, I would strongly encourage us to include in our statement an acknowledgement of systemic racism and how it's affected the institutions in which we participate and oversee, and what that impact has been on people. You know, certainly the death of George Floyd is one of many circumstances where we have seen Black Lives Matter come together to do a rallying cry for a broad overhaul and focus on racial equity in this country. And I think that we need to listen to those calls and to lift that up. So I do know in the versions that have been shared here that each one of them takes out a reference to systemic racism, and I would like to make sure that we include that in any statement we make. I also think it's really important that we acknowledge the good work that we've done here in Concord, but there are times to do that, and there are times when it makes sense to focus on the urgent call to action ahead of us. And I think we need to be really thoughtful about how we frame that as we move forward with this statement tonight. I think that often when we talk about the intersection of race and the impact it has on a community, that there's a tendency to say it doesn't happen here, it's not part of our experience. And I would like to say, on a body of 15 white people, that I think that it's more important than ever that we make sure that we're listening to the experiences of people of color in our community and around the nation who are asking us to not be defensive when we make these statements, but to show our sign of support, that we will do everything within our power and we're going to take the steps necessary. And I know that there's a strong commitment by many people on this team to make that happen and in our community. But it is really important that people feel comfortable, that we understand what the real root issues are, that we're ready to address them, and that we're not going to be defensive or put up our guard in how that conversation unfolds, because we do want to listen to those voices. And with that, I will turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council Nyan, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. I'll start off by echoing something that Councilor Keach said last meeting, which is I do not believe the council should be making a statement this evening on this particular issue, only for the sheer fact that it sets a precedent that we've never done so before. There are many, many issues that we could take positions on, and I think we're beginning something that we may be setting ourselves up for doing many more of these in the future, and it's kind of breaks with the council's tradition. That being said, we find ourselves here tonight to address this important matter. So the draft I put together was primarily designed to reflect a statement that everyone in the city, to include the elected officials, city leadership, members of the employees, would feel comfortable supporting. I don't know anybody who is supportive of racism. We want to end racism. We want to promote cultural diversity and cultural acceptance. I do not, frankly, like any references to police brutality. I think even having that reference in our statement somehow passes that sentiment on that we feel that way about our police department. I don't think any of us mean that. I don't think any of us feel that way, and I don't want our statement to reflect that. So consistent with that, I was trying to find a statement that could be certainly recognize the events that have happened recently, to show that we believe that our own police department has performed properly in their operations, how they conduct themselves, whether it be community policing, reaching out to other individuals of all ethnic backgrounds, to show that we support them and that we appreciate all that they've done. And meanwhile, finding a message which all of us could stand behind a singular voice to say, yes, we all have a responsibility to promote diversity. And it's not just among people of color. I know that's the message that we are trying to convey, but it's really a message of solidarity and support for all people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Crederick, would you like to?
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate it. It's interesting. I'm very glad that I received the email from Melissa Heinbach. That's actually the thinking that I was, the vein of thinking that I was under, is that we have an opportunity to look at across all of city government and see if there are any systematic elements of racism here in our community. I so very much appreciate this movement across the country, but as a city councilor, we have to be self-reflective of our own community. As Councillor Nyan pointed out, any message of police brutality to me seems to go against what we ourselves learned as councilors, that when New Hampshire Public Radio filed for a right to know action, they wanted to know about police brutality in our community, any complaints of racism, settlements, etc. Over a 10.5-year period, there were none. That's an important message for our community to know. Our community of our Black community, our colored community, they all need to know there was zero. So the statements that we make with regards to what progress we've made in our community for community policing, that's an important statement that can't be left out. But we can take that longer view. We're the employer here. We are the ones on the city council that set the tone for every single employee in this organization and all of our hiring practices. And that's the message that I want our community to know, is that this doesn't start in one department, it goes to all departments. And we can do this review and we can be better. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. If you would indulge me, just before I speak to kind of what I put together, I just wanted to give you a 2-minute kind of synopsis of some of the things I've been working on the past week or so. After this conversation began here in Concord, but more globally, what's been going on across the country and all, I've had community members reach out to me, and I've been meeting with folks and trying to put together some organized thoughts as to how we should move forward. So I broke it down into 4 general categories after kind of talking to folks. And the first, before we begin, and I think you'll see this reflective in my comments, is that I did not settle on any specific policies, because it's my strong belief that before we begin setting out on any particular policy, we really need to listen to people first. For us to predetermine exactly where we're going without listening to people, I think is short-sighted. So the first thing I think we need to do is actually be reflective of ourselves. And what I'd like to do is bring together probably the school board, the zoning board, the planning board, boards or positions in government which has authority over other people, decision makers. And I'd like to spend some time. There's actually there's some activity over at UNH. There's some great resources and great people in this area to really talk about really us, because when you do look around, we are very white. And I think we need to talk about white privilege. We need to understand our own belief systems and where we are and where we're coming from individually first. The second phase I'd like to do is really bring in organizations within our community who can talk about their experiences with either government or with our community. And so we, after we're reflecting on ourselves, we listen to what other people are experiencing. The third thing is, I think it's important that we also listen to our police department. I think we owe them the opportunity to talk about some of the things they're doing. I think that the Public Safety Committee is going to do a lot of that work ahead of time, but I do think it's worthwhile to take some time to listen to what it's like to be a police officer in Concord and some of the challenges they have, and to get a better understanding of some of the policies. And I think will dovetail nicely with public safety advisory. And thirdly, which I think is probably the most important piece, besides being reflective, is that we need to open up to community conversations. And what I'd like to do is have a series of forums to give everyone in our community the opportunity to talk about their experiences, where they think we should be going, and how we should move forward. Because at the end of the day, we can put any kind of words on a piece of paper we wish, but I think we're going to be measured by what we do. And I think before we take that action or before we set out a specific policy, it's going to be important to listen to others, because I'll speak for myself. I don't pretend to have the answers. And after a long conversation Saturday with a friend of mine, he made it perfectly clear that the experience that I have as a white man and he as a black man are very, very, very different. And I think I may have known that, but until you're sitting across the table, maybe you've been having a beer with somebody, you'll learn a whole lot more. So I think we need to take the time to pause and to do a whole lot of listening. So So what I did with that as a basis, and hopefully that'll give you kind of where I was coming from. And by the way, that is not in stone. That is a outline that I welcome input from anyone. But with that, I'd be the first to tell you that I used everyone's ideas. I thought that Councilor Kretovic, Councilor Nyan, and Councilor Rice-Hawkins had wonderful things within each one of their statements. So I tried to pull out things that I thought would make some sense. And so I readily admit that I stole your work. I also spent some time talking to folks and across the country who I know, and to share some of the ideas. And ultimately, that's where I came up with really the 4 paragraphs. So it may not be specific enough for some, which I fully appreciate, but I do want. I was trying to capture all of the some of the thoughts within the community and with the council. So with that, I'll stop and we'll open it up to whoever would like to go next. Councilor Kennison.
First of all, thank you everybody for putting in the time to address this issue. I wanted to comment on Councilor Kretovic's statement, which I like, because I think we need to have a stronger statement about the senseless death. As she puts it, as mayor and city councils, we condemn the senseless deaths of Black Americans at the hands of police officers who violated their oaths to protect and serve. And then later on, she goes on to acknowledge the gratitude to our police department. And I think those two things are important. And if I think it needs to be explicit, and the way she has done it, I think is well done. That's it.
I have Councilor Keach next.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a couple points. One, I think we're all on the same page here. I really do. It depends on how we communicate the message. But we talk about systemic racism. I think we have a systemic problem as a council, as elected officials, that we have ignored a whole bunch of problems: homelessness, food insecurity, drug addiction. And when those problems aren't addressed adequately, it gets thrown in the lap of the police. And most of them do the best they can, but that's not a solution. That's a reaction. And I'll share a quick story. Last Thursday night, I went out to go to my mom's house, and somebody was breaking in my car, stealing, and he put a knife to my face and said, "You know, I'm going to cut you." So I dialed 911. So defunding the police, what does that look like? That's not a solution. So I guess, short version is there's a whole bunch of social issues that we have not addressed as a council, as the legislature, as the federal government, that need to be addressed. And it would take a big burden off the back of the police. But I think I'm on the same page as all of you. Nobody wants brutality. Who does? And I think we have a great police department. And I just want to make sure that we acknowledge the good work they've done. And the last point I'll make is, believe me, any institution can improve themselves. My business, your business, any of us. Self-reflection is a good thing. So I'll end it there.
Councilor Warner.
Thanks, Your Honor. There was a reference made to our sort of general processes at the beginning of our meeting around resolutions. And while I can appreciate that a resolution about campaign finance or a myriad of other things might set a precedent, I think that what we're talking about tonight and issuing a statement about tonight transcends that so wholly that I don't think there's any consideration for that aspect. I see no danger of a precedent by issuing a statement for something as serious and needed as this. So number one. Number two, I do think that we need to acknowledge the aspect of institutional racism. I like Councilor Kretovik's statement in particular because it explicitly acknowledges the misdeeds and the misapplication of force by police, but also acknowledges our particular situation here in Concord. I like that approach because, as I said, I think we need to be explicit about how we feel as a governing body in acknowledging where we are, where we have been, in a context of where we need to go with our community in partnership.
Thank you very much. Council Chaplin.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess I'd just like to make a couple of points. One is regarding the sense of breaking a precedence. I've, in the past, strongly supported this body not taking public positions as a whole on various issues. I think that has been a good precedent. However, I think that our community and our nation is in a situation that is without precedence in the sense that we are really at a turning point where I think the groundswell of public outrage over the situation that has been recurring not just once, not just twice, but countless times with people of color and law enforcement officers has reached a point where the country, I think, is gaining a consensus that something really has to be done to address this. I think that as white folks, I agree. I don't think that we can really see the way the system has been stacked. I mean, until I heard about redlining, it was something that was completely off my radar screen, and yet it has had an ongoing and deleterious effect and impact on the Black community and other communities of color. Relative to the defund the police movement, ironically, I think referencing Councilor Keach's comments, my understanding, which may be flawed, of the defund the police movement is indeed to look at the things that Councilor Keach has brought up, to consider the fact that some money might be better spent in social services, addressing homelessness, addressing drug addiction, addressing domestic issues, so that we don't put our police officers in the position of being therapists, dealing with people with psychological issues, dealing with people who are homeless. And, you know, being for 6 years, the city councilor for Ward 4, I can not even count the numbers of times that I've had interactions with the police department on behalf of constituents regarding the homeless population. And I think that there's a very valid discussion that we can have in this community about, is that an appropriate role for our police, or are there better ways for us to address that and other social issues? So I do think that we need to make a strong statement about systemic racism. You and I may not experience it, but members of our communities of color do. And I also though think that we do need to acknowledge that our police have done a fine job. You know, but we also need to acknowledge that our knowledge may not be comprehensive. I agree with the mayor's statement. I think at our last meeting, we can always do better. And I think that that's what this statement, which I support, should strive to do, is to underline that we can do better and that we as a body and as a community intend to do better. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really like in the letters this call to action, because we do need to do something that's significant, not just symbolic. In the near future, we're going to see a lot of possible mandates, many changes in how our police are trained as first responders. And as city councilors, I believe it's our duty to make sure that all the policies under our control reflect and meet the city's ongoing societal and cultural changes. So I'm in support of putting one of these out one of these letters out. I'm not going to choose one. I think we're going to get to that quite quickly because they all are pretty much have the same thing in mind. But I do want to see what the paragraph about convening the department heads and looking at this, and above all, last but certainly not least, as counselors, that we get the training we need to in awareness. So I will leave it at that, and I too thank everyone for submitting something.
Thank you. Councilor Crederick?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to point out what Councilor Keach said about our police force being the front line for mental health issues, homelessness, etc. It's been about 2 years. Our department, their own, sought out grant money to get the crisis intervention training through NAMI so that they could be the front line of our mental health issues. And they reach out to our partners in the community for added support. That notion that they are the front line, we're already supporting that. They've been doing that for 2 years. And they've been going through this training, educating our patrol officers. And if we're going to take the stand that they shouldn't be the front line, then moving in a direction that does look at our community partners in a more direct way is the way we should be going. But I don't want the council to feel like we aren't doing that. We are. We've asked them to, and they're stepping up and doing it without being asked to do it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Hatfield?
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you very much for kind of laying out your current thinking. That was extremely helpful. I just want to start by saying to Councilor Keach, I'm so sorry that happened to you. It sounds horrible. I'm really sorry. And to thank Councilor Champlin, because I thought he did a nice job for me, kind of explaining why defunding the police, as it's called, really tries to get at some of those challenges that we've placed on the police. And I just wanted to share briefly, I had the opportunity to participate in one of the UNH programs that you might be referring to. The one I did was called the Leadership Learning Exchange for Equity. And I really support your thoughts, Mr. Mayor, about having those of us in positions of power and authority in the city go through a similar process. And one of the most interesting things about that group is that it's a white affinity group, and it's so that we as white people don't ask people of color what we should do or what we need to do or what the problems are, but we really take on the work ourselves. So I would commend that kind of an approach, while we are also at the same time listening to all kinds of people in our community. With respect to the statements, I do support the original statement that Councilor Rice Hawkins had put forward, but I think if people aren't comfortable with that, I like what Councilor Kretovic did with that original statement. She kept a lot of the language that was originally in the statement, and then I think adding in the note of gratitude to the police, while also saying that comes with a caveat that we expect, everyone's going to expect more and more from them, so we want to work with them to see how we can improve. I like that approach. You probably don't want to get into wordsmithing, but I do think referring to systemic racism is important. And so I would suggest that at the end of the first sentence in Councilor Kretovic's statement, that we consider just adding where she says that we stand with people in communities across the country who are demanding a renewed focus on racial equity. I would propose adding something like "and an end to systemic racism," because I just think that's really important for us to acknowledge. Thank you for letting me go on for so long.
Councilor Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too thank all the councilors who submitted a statement. And I too would like to either in Councilor Kutovic's or Mayor Boulet's statement, I think we need a statement of systematic racism. And I do believe we need to acknowledge what is happening in the country. And I think we do have a community of color, and I think putting out a statement that that we hear and we're going to act. And I'd like the council to remember that our first action was not a statement, but it was actually an action. And our first action was calling the Public Safety Committee together to bring the chief in front of the committee and to go over our current police policies, and also to go over the 8 can't wait, and that is a public forum. So we might have been slow putting out a public statement. We were not slow about doing an action item to start addressing systematic racism in policies and looking to improve where we can improve, and looking at what we're doing well and what we're not doing well, and do we need to be more transparent. So with that said, I can go with either Councilor Krekovitz's statement or Mayor Boulet's statement. I really do like the idea of the mayor bringing in all these different, the school board and all different members of our community to really work on a holistic view so we can continue this conversation and moving forward as a whole, and let everyone realize that we're looking at this as a citywide holistic view, and something that we want all our citizens and to feel that they're treated fairly and safe, no matter what department they're accessing in the city. Thank you.
I have Councilor Todd, Councilor Grady Sexton, and Councilor Matson, just in that order. So Councilor Todd.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd also want to thank you and my 3 colleagues for their careful, articulate consideration of this issue in the statements that they've drafted. It's very helpful. Racism is a ghost that has haunted all of us for far too long, and we have an opportunity now to help put this ghost to rest. What I like about all of the messages that were drafted is that they all, to my mind, seem to address our community, which is so important. This is a message for the people of Concord that we're working on tonight, and it's in line with our community's reaction, starting especially 10 years ago, that racism and xenophobia are not going to be tolerated in our community. It's just not acceptable. And I see the messages as our verbal commitment to that as a council. Also, I like the approach of including all of the other important institutions, as Your Honor has suggested, and Pennacook is certainly ready, including our Merrimack Valley School District and others. I also do like that Your Honor specifically mentioned in his statement, George Floyd. I just think personally that's important. It's just important. But again, we'll be working through the details on that, I guess, as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Grady Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what's as important as putting out a statement is the actions that follow the statement. And it sounds like the council is really committed to a long-term process. And this isn't something that's done overnight. And I just really appreciate everyone's commitment to actively trying to advance anti-racist policies throughout our entire city organization. The one thing that I heard from a number of people was that there is an interest in ensuring that the term institutionalized discrimination is incorporated in these policies. One thing that I would offer is using the mayor's statement as a base, and then using Councilor Rice Hawkins' piece that starts at our nation's long and harmful history of systemic racism and institutionalized discrimination requires all of us to work harder to actively address and challenge racism and bias. And I think that that piece could be placed within the first paragraph of the mayor's statement. If people wanted to look at that option, it's really important to me that we build consensus and that all of us are able to get behind this statement tonight. So just wanted to offer that as a possibility.
Thank you very much. Councilor Matson.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to also to say that I do think we need to add reference to the systematic racism in there because it is important, and it has been too long ignored, or maybe just not focused on. So for us, I think it's also extremely important. I think, as several councilors have said before, that we have a call to action. A statement by itself really doesn't have much meaning. So for our purposes, I'm gratified to see that it looks like the council all basically is on the same page, that we should take a look at our organization and to take a look at training that can be brought for all of us, including counselors and across the board for all city staff, so that we can be that welcoming and acknowledging and bring that equality that we all are looking for to light. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Bouchard, did you want to go again? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Just wanted a little, from Councilor Grady Sexton, if I may ask a question. Which paragraph did you want to move out of Councilor Rice Hawkins?
So I was thinking, is it okay to respond, Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely.
I was thinking about the sentence that starts with "our nation's long and harmful history of systemic racism" from Councilor Rice Hawkins's statement could be moved to the bottom of the mayor's introductory paragraph.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good addition. Thank you.
If I had one quick thing, if you look at mine, if you wanted to change, I think it'd be a healthy change to add in mine, second paragraph. We acknowledge the platform we have and about to use to speak out against systemic racism. You could add the word systemic right in that first sentence if you wanted to. Any inequality so could be safe for all. So, Councilor Rice Hawkins, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you to the time everybody is obviously committed to kind of reviewing and thinking about this. I'd be supportive of moving forward with Councilor Kretovik's piece with the systematic racism portion added in there, and then adding a couple of the action items from the mayors. I think that captures kind of the consensus from a lot of the different perspectives that people have added. And I also just want to say, for folks who are listening in, I know it's really hard to pay attention to the wordsmithing here. So I will post these on my council page afterwards for anybody who's interested. And I'm glad we're at home so I can cut up and go through the statements as we're doing this. It's a lot of good ideas here. Thank you.
Councilor Hawkins, what action items are you referring to?
So I think that you have a line in here about the work ahead is both immediate and long-term, as well as expansive, and the inclusive forums that we'll create. I think that that's the biggest takeaway from your section that I would add into Councilor Kretovik's.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we all had a chance to kind of share if we wanted to. Which one would you like to work from? Jennifer, what do you think?
I think Byron should cut and paste and send that out to the council. He's so fast. He's so fast. Did you understand?
What we were talking about, Councilor.
Yeah. Did you understand what Councilor Rice Hawkins was asking?
Yeah, but I wasn't following it along to edit.
Stand by.
May
I'm afraid I'm a chronic editor who tries to make it nice and tight. And I did a little bit of cutting, but
Hang on.
I don't have those, but I guess Councilor Kredic, if you want to start with yours, I just have a couple questions.
Yes.
Why do you not? I mean, I thought it was really important, just as Councilor Todd stated, that we talk about George Floyd. I think it's important we say his name, that we recognize it, and the many more that you have. Why did you choose to not actually speak of and say their names?
I actually tried to take the wording from Councilor Rice Hawkins and start there because we already had a starting point, and I didn't want to sway too much from her message because I thought what she had there was a really good basis for a conversation for us to refine our message. It wasn't left out at all. Honestly, I would have used my buddy Arthur, who I grew up with, which was just a fine man who led a terrific life as a chef in a restaurant that I worked in, and ended up in prison and dying. So if you'd have told me to pick someone else's name, I'd have picked Arthur.
That's very sorry. For me, one of the things, there was a couple of things important in mind that I readily admit that I picked and chose from everyone else's, but I'm just curious. I thought it was important to make this specific and personal, and I was curious why you didn't choose to go that path.
Yeah, it's an excellent.
Not that one way is better than another. I'm just why this.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and thank you for asking it. So, in some of the original drafting and speaking to members of the community, there was some feedback because it originally did say George Floyd and other Black Americans who've been murdered, and I think the feedback that I got was, that this moment is what has captured the nation's attention right now, but every day Black Americans in our community face these same challenges, and that was why we changed it. I'm comfortable with either way, but that was the feedback I got and why it originally changed.
Councilor Kenson?
Yeah, in the beginning of Councilor Kredovic's first paragraph, why couldn't we put in the death of George Floyd and the many other Black Americans at the hands of police officers? Because I think it's really apparent that he's just one in a long line of previous police brutality. So that would change.
Mr. Mayor, I just took a crack at redlining in these edits. Is it acceptable to do reply all to the clerk's email to just share it around?
How about we do this? What if, so it seems like Councilor Champlin, you've made some changes as well?
Just the only changes I made was to eliminate some verbiage to make Councilor Kredovic's statement, which seemed to have some traction with people, just to make it a little bit tighter. I haven't made any of the other changes that have been suggested.
So Councilor Hatfield, what I was going to suggest perhaps is if Councilor Champlin, if you could both send your changes to the clerk. The clerk can send, obviously we all have access to the internet right now. The clerk can send it out. We could take a 2-minute recess and we'll get a chance to read them, and then we can come back and have a discussion. I'll be honest with you, I can multitask only so much, and I'm trying to juggle, so it helps to have something in front of me. Councilor Ray Sexton.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
That's okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was wondering if there's any way that we could screen share so the public could see the document.
Okay. I don't have that ability, but if somebody does, I think that's a great idea.
General capability. The clerk.
No.
Clerk or the city manager would have that ability, is what Councilor Grady Sexton said.
Yep. No, I heard. As long as you're not asking me to do it, then we're all good. Madam Clerk, do you have the ability to do that?
I have never done it before, Tom, and I think Carlos is here too. They have that better skill set than I.
Okay. So how about this? Let's take a 1 minute recess. You all send your proposals to the clerk, and let's give the manager and Mr. Bahia the ability to screenshot those, or not, share the screen, sorry. And we'll come back in a minute. How's that? Is that acceptable? Okay, we'll stand in recess for a minute. Emails from the clerk. Okay, do we have everybody back first? Just want to check. Okay, your minute's up, everybody. Council Bouchard? Council Grady Sexton?
I'm here.
Oh, you are, okay. Okay, Council Grady Sexton? Council Fennessy? Council Nine? Council Nine?
I am here.
Okay, perfect. Looks like we have everybody back. Okay, we have a draft in front of us. Mr. Manager, which one is this?
This is Councilor Hatfield's draft.
Okay. Councilor Hatfield, do you want to take us through this?
Sure. So you can see the red lines, or in this case, blue lines. I added in the reference to George Floyd because several people had suggested that. Then I think there are several places we could put in the word systemic. I chose that one right in the beginning. And then down below, I grabbed a couple of the sentences from the mayor's statement because I think it sounded like people liked the action-oriented closing.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about those changes? And I apologize, when the screen's up, it's hard for me to see, so I'm going to just keep scrolling through and I'm not seeing anybody wave their hands, so, okay. Mr. Manager, could you share Council Champions?
Councilor Nyan has his hand up. And we'll...
Oh, sorry, Council Nyan?
Thank you, Your Honor. No particular feedback relative to proposed changes. I do, however, want to suggest we consider at least a statement inclusive not just of ourselves, but city leadership and other employees as well.
Councilor Nyan, let me just ask you a question. I picked that up from yours, and I'm just not. This is from the way I've read this. This is from us. This is from the council. When we start talking about employees and anyone other than the manager, I just worry we don't have control over that. That's the manager's responsibility. So maybe I'm misinterpreting what you mean by that, but I was cautious about that.
Your Honor, I guess my approach here is, yes, we're trying to make an unprecedented statement as a council. I understand that. If we are not comfortable making a statement that all of our employees can get behind, I think the message needs to be modified. I can't speak for the manager or Chief Osgood or any employee for the city any more than anybody else can, but I believe the statements that we're trying to make relative to a city being unified in its opposition to racism and social inequality, that we could craft a statement that everybody could believe in. That's what I'm trying to get at, is it needs to be an all-inclusive statement.
No, I appreciate that. Mr. Manager, did you have an opinion about that? Okay, probably not. Any further questions about this Council Hatfield's proposed changes? Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you. I think I heard support for actually adding in that whole paragraph about systemic racism. And so I wanted to see if that was true, that I think would go probably underneath that first paragraph, the one that had originally read, every person in our community deserves to be able to count on fair and just treatment. especially within the leadership and institutions of our democracy. Our nation's long and harmful history of systemic racism and institutionalized discrimination requires all of us to work harder to actively address and challenge racism and bias. And I think I heard support to have that whole paragraph in there.
Okay. Okay. Stay with that. And why don't we bring up Council Champlin's changes to get a chance to look at those as well? Mr. Manager, in the meantime, would you like to share?
Yeah, I don't have anything from Council Champlin for any changes, so we don't have that. I think there was a question asked of me earlier, but I'm working on some other emails coming in from other councilors as this is going on, so I can't do those three things at the same time.
Okay. Just for you, Council Champlin's changes were sent to us by the city clerk at 6:31.
Right, and then when I go to open that up, there's nothing there.
Okay, so
Your Honor, if this
is this a screenshot by me? I'm just kidding.
Your Honor, if I can mention to the city manager, you basically scroll down to Councilor Kretovik's statement, and I eliminated some verbiage, and those places are indicated by boldface text.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, it's hard for me to, I think it's in the third paragraph now. I eliminated, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get.
Oh, I can see something. Oh, so it's in one of those. Okay, so I'll have to share all four of them again to show that, right?
I believe so, yes.
So Carlos, if you go into the other document, it's way down. It's very light. It's very light bold. Yeah. I was looking for a separate document, not the four documents combined.
I was editing on the fly.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
It's not this email.
Yeah, it's not that email. I will send it to I'm not sure. City manager, can I send it to your email address?
Yes.
In the meantime, Council.
Send it to Carlos. Carlos is the one who's sharing the screen. We've got now several from the city clerk.
Okay. Council Bouchard, would you like to?
This is not the way.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. At some point, can we have the clerk read these statements? Because for me, it's very hard to follow the cut and paste when they go up on the screen. And at least for me, it would be beneficial to hear them at one point in time when we think we have drafts of ones that we like.
We're just going to have Council Champlin go through his proposed changes, and then why don't we move to just reading it so we can start making decisions.
Thank you.
So while we're going through this, I would just simply share, I know this is a bit painful in the sense of trying to do something this important over Zoom, but I really do appreciate everybody's patience. Councilor Kretovic?
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe that Councilor Champlin's version came before we had added discussion with regards to adding elements of your letter in there as well. And so the latest may actually be the one that Councilor Hatfield presented. This does add the and an end to systemic racism, but it does not add the action items that were in your piece. And I think that collectively as a council, that's the consensus we're moving towards.
Okay. Before I recognize Councilor Champlin, Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. So I appreciate all the time and work everybody's put in, and I would just say, as I've said previously, I think this is an important thing, and I'm much more concerned with the action items than the crafting of the statement at this point. And I hope that we spend at least as much time as we've spent, and hopefully significantly more, coming up with what we're actually going to do to address these issues.
Thank you. Councilor Champlin, would you like to take us through?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Essentially, again, I was just tightening things, not adding a lot of verbiage, except for the wording in the first paragraph around ending systemic racism. In the second paragraph, I eliminated some wording just to make it more direct and impactful. I hate that word, but it's the first one that came to my mind. So that it just says, we further express our gratitude and appreciation to the police department. In the third paragraph, I eliminated the reference, some references there, and just said, we can always do better. And down in the next paragraph, I eliminated some wording in the last sentence and just started with engaging in public conversation about those policies, et cetera. Really just trying to tighten it so that it has the maximum impact.
Okay, thank you. Is there a way to meld these two between Councilor Champlin and Councilor Hatfields?
Your Honor, I just took a crack at that. If you give me another minute or so, I can recirculate.
As long as you don't ask me to do it, because I am not tech savvy to do that.
Well, I was thinking if I had another minute to just go through it one more time, I could send it to the clerk and then maybe she could read it as requested.
You know what? We're going to take another 1 minute recess, and you take your time to do that, and then that way we can do it right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think Janice, the clerk, and our assistant city manager both should have the changes. So what I'm seeing on the screen is that, Councilor Hatfield, is that what you melded together? Okay, so if we could come out of recess. Councilor Rice Hawkins, are you there?
Can you change that, Carlos?
Councilor Bouchard?
Can you?
You can type it. You can type this.
Here.
Councilor Keach? Councilor Fennessy? Councilor Todd?
Here.
Councilor Nine? Councilor Keach?
Keach is here.
Councilor Nine?
I'm here.
Okay, we have everybody. Councilor Hatfield, why don't you take us through it?
Okay, so the first change, it's all shown in blue on your screen. The first change was to add in the reference to George Floyd and others. Then I added in the statement that was suggested, an renewed focus on racial equity and an end to systemic racism. Then there's another reference in the next line to systemic racism again. Then that next insertion is from Councilor Rice Hawkins' original statement that she had referenced right before we broke. And as she said, I thought I heard some earlier conversation about support for placing that in, so I just copied and pasted it right in. The next change was Councilor Champlin's suggestion, just to tighten up the language a little bit, but it doesn't change the meaning. And the following paragraph is the same, just trying to tighten things up a little bit. And then in the next paragraph, I was trying to find words to cut. So I took out the words "in this moment," but would totally defer to others. And then at the end, I pasted in the language from the mayor's draft statement about acknowledging the work ahead.
So who has questions or comments?
Mayor Xander, I can't get to my hand up right now. Thank you.
That's right, Hawkins.
Thank you. I think this is great. I think we're very close. I had two just very technical things to tighten it a little bit. I think we should take out the reference as previously stated and just say our city is also undertaking, just because somebody who hasn't heard the previous conversations wouldn't know it's previously stated. That would be my suggestion there. And then in the last paragraph, we talk about deficiencies in using more hopeful terms, maybe if there's areas for improvement. Identify areas of improvement.
Can I just inquire of Councilor Rice Hawkins just for a moment, Mr. Mayor, just so I capture that? What was your first change?
You just caught the first change, so that's great. And then the second one, that where it says deficiency, maybe just identify areas for improvement.
And that's Carlos, by the way, who's keeping up with this.
Sorry.
We're gonna just use this as one original. Now going forward, we make a change so they can see it once.
Lovely.
Where Councilor Rice Hawkins, your last.
So it makes sense, and we took out "in this moment" to identify areas of deficiency. I would just say identify areas for improvement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Pierce?
Question for Councilor Rice Hawkins, if I may. I think these changes are good. If we could scroll up to the additional paragraph right there, every person in community. I'm fine with the first sentence. I'm a little bothered by making this a national issue. I mean, it is a national issue, but does it help our case? Does it help the people of Concord to know about this? Because our focus is on the city, not on national. So can you rationalize that for me, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for asking. So I think the reality is that, members of our community are impacted wherever they go when they confront institutionalized racism. And that historically, even though members of this council may feel good about where we are or where we're heading to be as a community right now, over time, that has not always been the case. And because the history of systemic racism and institutionalized discrimination is so pervasive, it is really important that we acknowledge that because there are ways in which that presents itself that are not readily apparent to those who don't face the brunt of that discrimination. So I think it's important, and I think one of the things that I've heard in listening to community members most impacted and to those organizing the Black Lives Matter events here in Concord and across our state and nation, that is really important that we address that specifically. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for the answer.
Okay. Council Warner.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, I echo Councilor Rice Hawkins in this point. I think it's extremely important that we integrate ourselves into the national picture, that we stand with those across our nation, and as well as those folks in our community who are experiencing racism every day, even the subtle type of racism that is not apparent to us at all most of the time. So we really need to acknowledge that aspect. I think that's very important.
Thank you. I have Council Mattson and Council Kinnison.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have one edit only to just sort of change the sentence following. I got to scroll down, but it says, Councilor Rice Hawkins above talked about changing the deficiency to an improvement. And then the following sentence also talks about improvement. And I was thinking to make it a little bit more specific, saying we must identify where we can drive change to assure the betterment of all members. That way we're not using improvement too many times, but we're also making it a bit more specific about.
Okay.
Making Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. I have Councilor Kinnison.
This is just a deleting one word. Can you scroll up? Okay. I would take, in the first paragraph, I would take out the word platform to we pledge to use our voices and our policies to combat. I don't think the need for platform is there. Just.
I apologize. Could you say that again, Councilor?
I would take out the word platform. It says we pledge to use our platform, our voices and policies. I would just say we pledge to use our voices and policies to combat systemic racism.
Gotcha. Thank you. Councilor Rice Hawkins.
Thank you. On the platform piece, I think that's an acknowledgement that we have a very particular platform as city elected officials and city government, but I'm not tied to that one either way. But I think in that next paragraph down, I think there was a auto word correct, and it changed it to systematic racism instead of systemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Chiplin.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's always a problem when you can't scroll yourself, but down in the last paragraph, which actually has changed a bit since I first saw this, but I would just suggest that in the next to the last sentence in that last paragraph, that we consider deleting process in front of improvement. We're actually talking a lot about improvement there, but that's just a little bit. I think again, I think it's tighter, and that sounds a little bit. Well, it's a little bit awkward. I think that it's nice and clean with improvement. And I finally would just say that, I hope that we're creating here a strapping racehorse rather than a camel. But I think we're well on our way to do that.
Thank you. Council Fennessy. And then we'll come back to Council Kennison.
Thank you. So I've taken everything, and I've, in looking at it, I feel like it's gotten a little unwieldy. So here's going to be my suggestion. It involves a lot of cutting. So
you go back to mine.
No. Although I'm, you're not too far off. So I've taken the current version, and I would say put a period at the end of "to protect and serve," then delete everything after that until you get to "we pledge." Keep the rest of that paragraph. Delete the second paragraph in its entirety. In the third paragraph, just make it "we also," which I think somebody already made that change. And then do the rest of that paragraph. In the fourth paragraph that begins this note of gratitude, that's already been struck out. What I would say is before the "we," just put "but," so it reads, "but we can always do better." Then I would change Concord plans to the city plans. After racial justice, I would put "to that end, we will be." And then I would take the very last sentence of the final paragraph and I would put it after "confident in our approach." I guess it's the last two sentences that got added to the last paragraph. And then I would cut the entire last paragraph.
Okay, I believe Councilor Rice Hawkins has a comment or question.
Yeah, sorry, that was a little difficult to follow with all of those, so I'd rather appreciate if we do it all. But I would say I think that I actually feel like we're like 98% there with what the statement reads right now. So I want to make sure that we're thoughtful about making major cuts at this point. Thank you.
Can I follow up on that?
Please.
Sure. My changes were not intended to change the content in any way. I just found that it was starting to get very repetitive. And I think there's an easier way to express some of the things in less sentences.
Councilor Rice Hawkins?
So I'd suggest then if we could take those one at a time, just so I can make note of it a little bit better, because that was quite a list there. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you would like, I'm happy to share. I could probably share my screen if they let me.
A follow up?
Please.
I think maybe, I don't know what would be appropriate here, but maybe a straw poll about how close people feel like we are on language, because I don't want to start with another drafting round if we can avoid it.
I'll tell you what, Council Nine's got his hand raised, so let's recognize Council Nine and we'll see where we go from there.
Nope.
Thank you, Your Honor. I kind of agree that we're getting very unwieldy with our words. I like the changes proposed by Councilor Fennessy for its simplicity.
Okay. Mr. Manager, do you have something you want to share?
Yeah, so I would suggest if we keep working with this document with those changes, you will not understand anything that's in the document by the time we're done. So it might be better to start with a brand new document. And if so, Councilor Fennessy has that, you can do that, because otherwise this is going to be unwieldy. I think you're at the point of the tipping point right now. So if we have a new document, we can start again and do that whole thing, if that's what people want to do. Otherwise, if you start putting more information.
I get you. Councilor Fennessy, how important are these changes to consider?
I'm happy, if you'd like, I can share my screen. I think it takes what we've been working on already and then just gets it to a place that I think we might be able to all agree on.
Okay. I don't know that you can actually share screen. Try it again. I don't know that you can actually share your screen, but if you want to send your changes Or can you?
I'm sharing right now.
How did you do that? Wow.
Can you
Spent
do
too much
accept
time
all
on-
changes?
Sure, I'll do that.
You definitely do it. I did by accident one time.
Okay. Constantly, you have proposals, and then afterwards I'm going to recognize Councilor Grady Sexton, who also I think has some proposed changes as well.
So I'm accepting the things that people have already seemed to have agreed on, and then you can just see my changes. That might make it easier. I'm going to scroll down. That's better for people. I think you can see pretty much everything.
Okay, you want to just take it through us real quick?
Sure. So as I said, basically struck out the end of the first sentence so that this ends at serve, put a period there, and then just start with we pledge. So that's all the same language. Just took out the entire second paragraph. Third paragraph is unchanged. The fourth paragraph added but in front of we can always do better. Over the coming months, changed Concord plans to the city plans. After racial justice put to that end, we will be. And then I just took the last two sentences that were added to the last paragraph and just moved them here. And then I just took out the last paragraph. And I did that primarily because as I started to read it, it felt like the third paragraph and the fourth paragraph were trying to say the same thing. And, we can, pick and choose and put some of those back in. I don't have a problem with that, but it felt like both paragraphs were trying to say the same thing.
Okay. So you hold that, and now I'm going to recognize Councilor Grady Sexton. And if you could share your screen, that'd be great.
Ooh, I don't have it up, Mr. Mayor. I think that the city manager and the clerk might.
Oh, okay. All right.
The version that I put together was the hybrid that I spoke about earlier that used the base as Mayor Boulet's base and added the piece about systemic racism from Councilor Rice Hawkins. I think it's a more succinct version. I think I do agree with Councilor Fennessy that there's a lot of repetition in this current version. So I just wanted to offer something a little bit, what I think is a little bit tighter, but keeps all of the core elements that we discussed.
Councilor, sorry. Mr. Manager, Mr. Bahia, do either one of you have the ability to share a screen?
Or the document that I shared with them.
Councilor Fennessy has to unshare his screen.
Sorry, I was working off a different computer.
Okay.
Okay, so your changes are in red.
Yeah, that's it.
Gotcha. Okay. You got that. With that, I'll recognize Councilor Nyan, Councilor Rice Hawkins, and Councilor Gemplin.
Thank you, Art. I think my hand was up from last time. Now that you have me here, I like the changes that are being proposed.
Which ones?
The ones that are on the screen, Your Honor.
Okay, all right. Councilor Rice Hawkins?
Thank you. I'm still trying to just review this one, but I would say, was my impression incorrect? I thought we were pretty close on the other one and want to see where we were.
I think some people may have been, but I think there are others who are not. And I think it's important that everybody get a chance to be able to share their thoughts. So,
Follow up?
Please.
Absolutely, for everybody's opinion, because I do want to make sure that's something we all feel comfortable about. I will need a minute to look through this a little bit closer just to make sure that we're not cutting some of the great context and work that was done over the last 45 minutes on that other statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Chairman.
Yeah, Your Honor. Well, we actually have so many versions right now. I was actually putting my hand up to comment on Councilor Fennessy's and suggest that the second paragraph that he cut was important. But like Councilor Rice Hawkins, I'm now at a point where I really need to digest Councilor Grady Sexton's suggestions and compare that to kind of what we've already done. So I'll put my hand down.
And Councilor Bouchard, Mayor Pro Tem.
She's on mute.
I unmuted myself. Okay. So I'll start over. So I like the hybrid that Councilor Grady Sexton put together. I believe it says everything that we've said in the previous document, only this document is more solid, it's succinct, it's strong, and it ends with action items. So I prefer this because I think it's a very clear, strong statement, and especially with the added paragraph of our nation's long and harmful history of systemic racism and institutionalized discrimination requires all of us to work harder to actively address and challenge racism and bias. So, so I'm throwing my hat in for the statement at this point in time. Thank you.
Muted, Mr. Mayor.
You're muted.
You're still muted, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, my apologies. Thank you. Council Warner.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do think it's important to revisit the second paragraph and to explicitly say that we stand with people because we are not apart from our constituents and the people that we represent. We are part of them. They are part of us. And I would urge us to revisit that aspect and that sort of value of how we put out this statement.
Council Chaplin.
Thanks, Your Honor. Reading through the first paragraph of Councilor Grady Sexton's proposed draft, I was wondering, Your Honor, since the wording came from you, could you, excuse me, let me just diminish something here. Could you explain what you mean by we pledge to reflect on our beliefs in that sentence? Because it's kind of vague to me.
I'm sure I could do it better, but I get what I was intending was to hold the mirror up to ourselves, like I spoke about, and to really kind of understand ourselves as decision makers, as with our own experiences, what we bring to the table, and so that we understand our own personal biases, our own. I think I'll speak for myself. After some long, hard, thoughtful consideration, I mean, there's no question that I probably have been a racist and not even have known it. I mean, it's not intentional and such, but just by simply growing up who I am and my skin color and such. So it was really meant to just be able to be self-reflective. I'm sure you can say a whole lot better.
Yeah, I could start throwing out, other verbs there, but we're starting to get really into weeds, I guess, is what reflect is a fairly passive, something like question our beliefs, something like that. But again, I guess I'm feeling like we're getting really in the weeds.
And we are. We have been for a while. Mr. Manager, you had your hand raised, I believe.
So in the first paragraph, we can't change it on this screen, but we would change systematic to systemic as we did previously.
Okay. Councilor Kretovic?
Thank you, Your Honor. Councilor Kennison is trying to get your attention to speak.
Okay. I don't see your hand raised, and I only have 5 tiles at a time. There, Councilor Kennison. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, I think I agree with Councilor Rice Hawkins in that I felt we were 90% there with the document. This hybrid to me seems cold. It's too choppy. It doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't get to the sensitivity that was reflected in the document that we had, I think, come 90% towards approval. So there's no way I would vote for something like this. It's just too, it doesn't carry the sensitivity that the other document did, I don't think. So that's my input.
Thank you. Councilor Nine.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lots of different versions, lots of different changes. On a personal note, I prefer the one that's on the screen now. However, perhaps as a way of giving us an opportunity to digest this, we can set this aside for a few minutes and maybe talk about some of the action items. And in talking about those action items, it may actually help us trigger other thoughts about our message. And so maybe just time to shift gears slightly.
Well, I tell you what I was going to do was have the clerk just take us through individually, each one, and to get a sense of where people are, which one they prefer, and then I can't think of a better way to just figure out if we have any consensus of which one to start with. But I think we're kind of down to 2 in my mind. There's the Councilor Kretovic's with the changes from Champlin and Hatfield, and I think some other people, Brady Sexton made changes. I think Rice Hawkins made changes. And then I think there's this one here, which is offered, it's titled Boulay Hawkins Hybrid. So did I miss something? I'm trying to summarize a little bit here, and that's what I had. Are we comfortable just kind of going down the roll and seeing what people think?
Sure.
All right.
Yes.
Madam Clerk, could you just kind of take us through? Or I could do it if you want.
I can see the one that I believe Carlos is sharing now. I don't have Councilor Fennessy's, and Carlos was editing the most recent, so he has that. He could share it. And then read it, or
Okay, I'll just take it through. Councilor Fennessy, what do you think?
I think the starting document probably should be, I'll call it the Kretovic version, with some additions or subtractions depending on what you're looking at. But I think that, from my perspective, is the one we should be working off of. I agree with most people. I think we were about 85, 90% there. My effort was an intent to make it better by, I think, making it tighter.
Cool, thank you. Councilor Champlin.
Thanks, Your Honor. I appreciate Councilor Fennessy's efforts to tighten things up. I also lean towards the Councilor Kretovic's, except that I would with Councilor Fennessy's edits, except that I would reinsert the second paragraph, which he deleted. Thank you.
Councilor Keach.
I would table the item and not vote.
Councilor Grace Sexton.
I think that I think the first version we were looking at is repetitive and needs to be tightened quite a bit. But I am open to whatever is going to bring us to consensus.
Thank you. Council Todd?
Thank you. Another option, Your Honor, would be to take, we'll call it the Fennessy edit version, and combine it with Councilor Grady Sexton's in terms of whatever items are missing from Fennessy's. But I'm certainly also open to Councilor Champlin's suggestion, and I know we'd want to hear from Councilor Rice Hawkins and others about any concerns they have about some of those edits. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Craig?
Thank you, Your Honor. I actually liked Councilor Fennessy's edits that were there, and I do appreciate the version that Councilor Grady Sexton brought forward. I think Councilor Todd's suggestion is actually very good.
Okay. Councilor Pierce?
I'm going to have to agree with my neighboring ward councilors. I think we're getting there without being too verbose, and the message is still there. So I would support the Fennessy Grady Sexton hybrid.
Okay, I'm trying to keep score here. Sorry. Councilor Hatfield.
Thanks. I really appreciate Councilor Grady Sexton's desire to be very concise. I almost wish we had started with hers. I think I liked Councilor Fennessy's edits for the most part, although I think I'm still digesting them. But that second paragraph, I feel really strongly needs to be in, because I think it provides some really good context. But I think he was making some big cuts, but I think it was going in the right direction.
Okay, Councilor Warner.
Thank you. I agree that we were very close with the Champlin and Hatfield, starting with the Rice Hawkins version. I think I can come around to supporting the edits that folks have been mentioning, but I do think that second paragraph is essential to put in there.
Okay, Councilor Kennison.
I don't think she heard you.
Councilor Kennison. Councilor Kennison.
Okay, what are you asking me?
I'm simply asking everyone to just share with the group where you feel comfortable and what you think we should be working with right at this moment.
Okay, I think we should not cut that second paragraph. I think that's essential. But I could go with the other cuts.
Okay, Councilor Nine.
Thank you, Arnold. I don't think we were as close to consensus on the first draft as people might think. I prefer the draft authored by yourself and Councilor Grady Sexton.
Councilor Madsen.
I like the conciseness of of what Amanda had done, Councilor Grady Sexton, in terms of melding, but I can work with the Kretovic version, edited, I think, fairly well by Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm still in favor of the Mayor Boulay, Rice Hawkins hybrid, and maybe with the changes that Councilor Fennessy brought forward. I do like having a concise, strong statement, but I also understand that some councilors feel like the first draft we were working on, and they're tied to that. But my first vote would be for the Mayor Boulay Rice Hawkins hybrid.
And Councilor Rice Hawkins.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go back to the Kretovic document we were working off of and to go through Councilor Fennessy's edits to it, just one by one, to make sure we understand, with the acknowledgement many people have said that second paragraph is really critically important, and I think it is. I also just thought it'd be helpful to let folks know that I have talked to many community members over the last couple of weeks about what this process and what this statement would look like. And so have tried to be very intentional about listening to what they'd like, particularly some of our leaders, with some of the local events, what they would really like to see in these types of statements. So I want to make sure whatever we come out with, that we acknowledge what their calls to action are and the language that they are using, that we should be amplifying. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so by my calculation, poor consensus, I'm trying to figure out. So why don't we go back to Councilor Fennessy's version, talk about that second paragraph and use that as the basis. So it's actually Kretovic Fennessy edits I got about 10 people, so let's go with that. Can you bring that back up on the screen, please?
Everybody see that now?
Yes. All right, you want to take us through one more time?
Sure. So
start at the top and work your way down.
Okay. So the first edit was to stop at serve and to take out "and we stand," that section. The idea was that I think that's duplicated primarily by this next sentence: "We pledge to use our platform."
So tell you what, if anybody who's called in and listening by phone, why don't you read that paragraph?
Sure. So it would read as mayor and city councilors, we condemn the senseless deaths of George Floyd and other Black Americans at the hands of police officers who violated their oaths to protect and serve. We pledge to use our platform, our voices, and our policies to combat systematic racism, to listen to the experiences of community members most impacted, and to reflect on our own roles and how to address these challenges as we shape our path forward together.
Anybody have any questions with that? Councilor Rice-Hawkins.
Yeah, I like making an affirmative statement that we're standing with those who are calling out racial injustice. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Fennessy, you want to continue, please?
Sure. So I deleted the second paragraph, and that was primarily because I think systematic racism has already been addressed. We could probably include, if somebody wants to put in something about our long and harmful history of it, we could probably add that up, I think, to that second sentence in the first paragraph, if that's the concern that I'm hearing from people. But I think most of the sentiments reflected there are shown in that first paragraph, or they're reflected in the third paragraph.
Okay. Why don't you read the third paragraph, and then I'm going to go back to the second.
Okay. So the third paragraph reads, we also express our gratitude and appreciation of our Concord Police Department. Our community can be proud of our police department and their commitment to protect and serve the people of Concord.
Okay. So with that, let's several of you addressed the need for a second paragraph. So let's open it up and talk about whether the second paragraph is something people are interested in adding to the prior paragraph, or how you like to address it. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Hatfield?
Thank you. I feel like it provides really important context, and racism is not just a Concord problem. And I think that it's very well written and concise, and I think it belongs in the statement.
Okay, Councilor Warner.
Thank you, Your Honor. I did want to go back and also add my voice to the "We Stand with People" part of that first paragraph. Again, we're not apart from our community. We're integrated into it, and we're integrated into this country. So I think that's important. The second paragraph, again, I agree with Councilor Hatfield. It provides a context. This whole statement is a context. This is a moral question. And we really have to express that with some conviction, emotion, and commitment. And I think, the tone of that is really important. I think that's why the second paragraph, I think, is really needing to be in here in part.
Thank you. Councilor Credit.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would agree with what Councilor Warner just said. I think that the repetitiveness comes from the fact that we're saying systemic racism again, and we actually could just shorten that to say our nation's long and harmful history and institutional discrimination requires that all of us work hard, et cetera, so that we are not repeating systemic racism again, but rather focusing on the institutionalized discrimination that happens throughout.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to make an executive decision. Ms. Fennessy, could you unstrike that, if you will, and bring it back? Okay, thank you. Could you take us to the fourth paragraph?
Sure. So in the fourth paragraph, it originally began, we can always do better. I added but, and then I changed Concord plans to the city plans. So now it reads, but we can always do better. Over the coming months, the city plans to convene community discussions and identify actionable steps to ensure that we are delivering on our commitment to racial justice. To that end, we will be undertaking a public review of our policing and use of force practices so that community members may feel confident in our approach. The work ahead is both immediate and long-term. I think I would take it out as well as expansive, although I have that in there right now. We will create inclusive forums for all voices that move us forward together.
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I like it.
I since that was my sentence, I purposely put the expansive part because I wanted to be the recognition of that we have things we have to kind of the low-hanging fruit as well as more long-term aspirational goals. But I wanted people to understand that this is a large, expansive, and what I'm getting at is not just about one particular item. It is not just about police. It's not just about housing. It's not just about economic justice. It's not about, I think it's truly expansive. When we hear from people, I don't want to be limiting. That was my intention. So I would ask you if you would all please consider just that. Anybody else any questions on that one?
I had one question, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Hatfield?
So Councilor Nyhan has several times made the point about, at least as I'm hearing him, about this kind of applying to the whole city. And I think that what would be the last paragraph in this version just really focuses on a review of policing and use of force. And the last paragraph that's struck, which I generally agree with striking it, it says it makes sense in this moment to identify areas of deficiency through all areas of city government. So I just wonder if we could capture that in the paragraph above that starts with, but we can always do better. Maybe before the final sentence that says the work ahead, maybe we could just add in, it makes sense to identify areas of deficiency through, or as I think then we edited that one too to make it more positive, areas for improvement throughout the city. So it's not just focused on the police.
Fancy, did you follow that?
I'm trying to figure out how to do it. Yes. So basically taking the sentence that begins, it makes sense, perhaps. All right, just a second here. So is that consistent with what Councilor Hatfield has suggested? Picking that sentence, it makes sense in this moment to identify areas of, I guess it would be improvement.
Yes, like areas for improvement, maybe.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I have Councilor Rice Hawkins.
I was just going to say I agree with that. That looks great. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Fennessy, that is the last paragraph, right? That there's no more to.
There's nothing left. Yep.
Okay. Councilor Champlin.
Your Honor, I cannot resist editing the editor, being an editor, and so I would just suggest that in that last paragraph, right there, thank you, Councilor Fennessy, I would just suggest that we delete to that end and go back to my original edit and start with "we," because I think that it's self-evident that you're referencing the sentence before. Just get it tight and right, and I think this sounds really good.
So just leave it as "we can do better." We can always do better.
No, it's the next sentence. Just get rid of "to that end" and say "we will be undertaking a public review." Start with "we."
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. And I hope that this version can find widespread support on the council. I think it really speaks to what we're trying to say and the way we're trying to clarify our position as a public body at this moment in time and history. Thank you.
Could we accept the changes on this so we could look at it on the unmarked? Just quickly read it without that, if that's acceptable.
I think it would be very helpful.
Okay, can you guys see that all right now?
Yes, thank you.
Can you read that out loud again?
Sure. As mayor and city councilors, we condemn the senseless deaths of George Floyd and other Black Americans at the hands of police officers who violated their oaths to protect and serve. We pledge to use our platform, our voices, and our policies to combat systematic. Sorry.
No, it's
racism.
actually systemic. It's systemic.
Oh, sorry. I thought I'd gone the other way. Systemic racism, to listen to the experiences of community members most impacted and to reflect on our own roles and how to address these challenges as we shape our path forward together. Every person in our community deserves to be able to count on fair and just treatment, especially within the leadership and institutions of our democracy. Our nation's long and harmful history of systematic racism. Do we want to take that out? I know there were some. Whether we should do it.
Let's just keep going and then.
Okay. Our nation's long and harmful history of systematic racism and institutionalized discrimination requires all of us to work harder to actively address and challenge racism and bias. We also express our gratitude and appreciation of our Concord Police Department. Our community can be proud of our police department and their commitment to protect and serve the people of Concord. But we can always do better. Over the coming months, the city plans to convene community discussions and identify actionable steps to ensure that we are delivering on our commitment to racial justice. We will be undertaking a public review of our policing and use of force practices so that community members may feel confident in our approach. It makes sense in this moment to identify areas for improvement in all areas of city government. The work ahead is both immediate and long-term, as well as expansive. We will create inclusive forums for all voices that move us forward together.
Sounds good.
Thank you. You had one question you want to go back to?
I did have a question in paragraph 2. I know Councilor Kretovic had suggested deleting systemic racism from there.
Councilor Kretovic?
Thank you, Your Honor. It just tightens up the paragraph a little bit because we have racism 3 times in that same paragraph. And that way we can go, our harmful history of institutionalized discrimination requires us all to work together. I think that we know that it's systemic racism based on the previous, it just tightens it up. I'm not married to it either way if we want to keep it.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
I can support taking that out as Councillor Kretovic just read it. So it says long and harmful history of institutionalized discrimination. That sounds good.
I support
If we
that
don't
as
take
well.
it out, it needs to say systemic.
I support it as well. I just had one other small edit in the last paragraph. The second to the last sentence where we say it makes sense in this moment to identify areas for improvement in all areas of city government. If we could change that to, it makes sense in this moment to identify areas for improvement throughout city government.
And we agree to get rid of Byron's butt.
One T or two.
That was actually Nathan's butt.
Councilor Fennessy, do you have that last?
I thought he wanted us to take out to that end, but perhaps Councillor Champlin wanted the butt gone.
No, that is incorrect. I thought the butt was a very good edit, Councilor Fennessy.
Okay. I apologize. I am trying to follow along best I can here. Councilor Grady Sexton, you had a point about that second paragraph.
If we're not removing the systemic racism, we need to change it from systematic to systemic.
Thank you.
And Mayor, this is Sandra.
Councilor Kenson.
I'm not wedded to this, but I don't think it hurts to mention systemic racism more than once. It's a very important factor in what's happening. So if it's taken out, I could live with it, but I'd like to see it repeated.
Councilor Mattson.
I'm good, sir.
Okay, sorry. Councilor Warner.
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree that we should keep systemic racism in that second paragraph. There's a difference between systemic racism and institutionalized discrimination. And I think that the statement needs to be as broad as possible, as I've stated before, in terms of our positions within our communities and society as a whole. And I think that reflects that better. I'd keep it in there.
Okay. Are you? Councilor Hawkins?
Thank you. I'd agree with that last statement by Councilor Warner and Councilor Kinnison. So thank you. I think the only thing that I noticed that was taken out that I didn't really hear disagreement with was when we had to protect and to serve in that first paragraph. It also said, and we stand with people and communities across the country who are demanding a renewed focus on racial equity. And I think it'd be great to include that to show that community support and acknowledgement if we could. Thank you.
What do people think about adding that back?
I agree.
Mr. Mayor, I agree, but I think in the spirit of trying to move this along and make sure everyone's on board, I guess I'd like to get a sense of how people are feeling about it now.
That's exactly what I was trying to do. So thank you for the assistance. That's good. We're going to get there. I feel it. Anyone else? I don't want to shortchange this by any stretch, but I think maybe just as is might work. Councilor Nyan, you had your hand raised, and then Councilor Rice Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. I prefer without that language, and I would also, there was an edit that was suggested prior, which is to strike our platform. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it adds to the discussion.
Councilor Rice Hawkins?
I think Councillor Nyan might just address this. I was going to say my coalition calls if you don't speak up when there's an offer on the table, then it stays in there. So, but it sounds like we have at least one person opposed and 2 people, 3 people in support. So I would be curious where others are at on that particular line. Thank you.
The platform or the other line that you brought up?
The previous line, and then if it makes sense, I think we're close to making a motion here.
I like where we are with what we're looking at right now. I think, given that it's Monday, and this is important, and I don't want it to be Wednesday and still important, that I'm good with what we have right here. I think it really encompasses everything we're trying to say. Just it may not be the way everyone wants to say it.
I think we're close. I think we're just about there.
Right, we specifically
platform in, and I think we're there.
So when you say we're almost there, just you're saying as is or adding that line?
As is. Oh, keeping platform in as, and then we're there.
Councilor Champlin?
Yeah, I can live. I can live with or without platform, and I can live without the added line.
Councilor Mattson?
I am happy with how it reads right now.
Councilor Fennessy?
I'm good with how it is right now.
Councilor Dodd?
We're with it like this. Thanks.
Councilor Bouchard?
I'm very good with how it is right now.
Councilor Keach?
I'm not happy with the word platform.
How about the sentence?
I can live with it, but I'm just not happy about platform. We don't speak as one body. We spoke as individuals.
Councilor Grady Sexton?
In the spirit of compromise, I think if there are 2 people who are uncomfortable with the term platform, I think that it's really important to listen and to remove that.
Okay. Councilor Casson, did I skip you, or I thought you were waiting earlier? But
Yeah, I'm happy with where it is. I prefer platform be taken out, but I can live with it as it is.
Okay. So I didn't quite keep track as best I did, but what I heard was we're going to leave that other sentence out, and it should read, we pledge to use our voices and our policies to combat, etc. Is that what I heard?
I heard from a majority of people, but I'm certainly happy to be involved in a straw vote again if you're looking for one.
You didn't call on me, Your Honor.
I apologize, Councilor Craig.
That's okay. I actually agree with Councilor Grady Sexton. I think that my first obligation to constituents is to listen and not just be a platform for my own voice. I'm not comfortable with platform. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I hopefully have recognized everybody who wanted to share their thoughts, opinions, etc. Unless I missed anybody. One last chance. Anybody have anything? Okay. So we have a proposal in front of us. Hopefully it does reflect some consensus that we worked on this evening. And Councilor Nyan, you raise your hand.
Thank you. I was just going to make a suggestion that the editor, whoever that might be right now, proofread this for some grammatical edits, commas, subject noun agreement. It's grammatically incorrect. Thank you.
And please save it.
That is a very smart comment.
As you speak.
So with that, then let's do one last opportunity for people to speak to the proposal as a whole, and then I would like to move to a vote. So anyone have any last things they'd like to share?
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, we'll go start with Councilor Bouchard.
In the spirit of consensus, I like the document as it is, but I can live with removing the word platform if that brings us all together as a body.
Thank you. Councilor Rice Hawkins, you have your hand raised.
Similar to Councilor Bouchard, I will support this where it's at. I do think it's important to recognize that our platform is using our institutional power and our power as elected officials in this city. And so I do want to say, just for folks who are a little uncomfortable with that, to either ask the question about what is different than using our voices and our policies and all of the tools we have available, and whether or not people want to have that question tonight. I do think it's something to discuss as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Warner.
Thank you, Honor. I support removing the word platform, although I have some real sympathy with what Councilor Rice Hawkins is expressing in terms of responsibilities that we all have.
Thank you. Councilor Champlin.
Thank you, Your Honor. I too support removing platform. To me, that phrase, our platform, is not as significant as the message that we've crafted tonight. I just want to say thank you to all the councilors who have contributed to the process. And I think it's a document that we can stand behind. I hope it has unanimous support. I think, again, as I've said, this is a very important time in our nation's history and in our community's history in order to try to address in a lasting fashion the issues around racial justice and eliminating systemic racism. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. I am looking to see if there's anyone else. I don't have anybody else's hand raised, so I would just simply like to add, I want to simply say thank you to everybody for their patience. This is a challenge over Zoom, but I think everyone was able to participate, and I really do appreciate that. I will simply say that everyone who took time to put words to paper and to edit this evening, I think everybody made it better. So we have a good document in front of us. But I will also say that they will simply be words on a piece of paper if we don't take action. And I think I've stated this several times, that the fluffy, nice words on a paper don't make a difference to anybody in their daily life. We have a responsibility as counselors, we have a responsibility as leaders in this community to truly just lead. And I think we have a lot of work ahead of us. And I'm hoping you all join me in the action phase as much as we've all joined together in putting this document together. So with that, I think we're pretty much wrapped it up. And I have a motion. Somebody like to make a motion?
I so move that the City Council adopt the statement before us.
Hatfield seconds.
Seconds. I'd like to, I'm not clear on the motion. Did we remove the word platform, or are we voting for it with the word platform in it?
We did remove the word platform.
Okay.
So we have a motion before us. I'm sure the clerk caught exactly who it was to speak. Excuse me. And it was duly seconded by at least most of everybody. Do we have any last comments they'd like to make before we vote? I have Council Warner, Champlin, and Rice Hawkins all with their hands up. I'm not sure if you want to speak again or they were up from last time.
No, I didn't lower it. My apologies.
Okay. Council Champlin, yes, maybe?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. And Council Rice Hawkins, your hand's still up. Do you want to? No?
Just thank you to everyone. This has been a very good process to go through tonight, and I appreciate all the remarks everyone made.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'm going to go through one more time. No one is waving their hands at me. So, okay. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Councilor Bouchard.
Yes.
Mayor Boulay.
Yes.
Councilor Champlin.
Yes.
Councilor Fennessy.
Yes.
Councilor Grady Sexton.
Yes.
Councilor Hatfield.
Yes.
Councilor Keach.
Yes.
Councilor Kennison.
Yes.
Councilor Kretovic.
Yes.
Councilor Mattson.
Yes.
Counselor Nyan,
Yes.
Counselor Pierce,
Yes.
Counselor Rice Hawkins,
Yes.
Counselor Todd,
Yes.
and Counselor Werner.
Yes.
Okay, with that, the statement is approved and adopted. Mr. Manager, I would ask you simply to have our PIO put this out on our web, and if she could disseminate that, that would be great. Much appreciated. Councilor Knight, you have your hand raised?
Yes, Your Honor. And again, prior to that going on the web, please have PIO also proofread that. Thank you.
Good advice. Mr. Manager?
Could Councilor Fennessy email it to the city clerk?
Thumbs up. Thank you.
Great question.
So with that, I would entertain a motion to go into non-public session in accordance with RSA 91A, colon 3, 2A through C, to discuss the manager's evaluation, as well as to confer with our legal counsel.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Madam Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Counselor Bouchard,
Yes.
Mayor Goulet,
Yes.
Counselor Champlin,
Yes.
Counselor Fennessy,
Yes.
Counselor Grady Sexton,
Yes.
Counselor Hatfield,
Yes.
Counselor Keach,
Yes.
Counselor Kennison, Counselor Kennison.
She's a yes.
Yes.
Thank
No,
you.
no, she's got to say it. Councilor Kennison, could you please vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Counselor Kretovic,
Yes.
Counselor Matson,
Yes.
Counselor Nyan,
Yes.
Counselor Pierce,
Yes.
Counselor Rice Hawkins,
Yes.
Counselor Todd,
Yes.
and Counselor Werner.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion to go into non-public. You all should have received a invitation. And that invitation, Madam Clerk, let's see if I can get this right. Would have come from the city, I believe, as a panelist. And it had a time on it of estimated time at 6:30 if you're looking through your emails.
The 6:31 should have been from me for non-public.
Oh, from, okay, from the clerk,
Yeah,
a non-public. Everybody understand?
so, yeah.
I did not, because I got a calendar invite, did not get a link for this, for the non-public.
The link's within the calendar invite.
I can't open it on my iPad for some reason, so, and it won't, I don't know why.
Same here.
So we can move it along because we're now at 8 o'clock and we started at 5.
Can I just make one announcement, Mr. Mayor? It goes along with what we've been discussing tonight.
Please.
I just want the council to be aware that tomorrow Change for Concord is uniting on the field for Black Lives Matter Candlelight Vigil. And that'll be at Keach Park from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. And there'll be a soccer game to watch and enjoy before the Candlelight Vigil. So Keach Park tomorrow night, 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your indulgence.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, I apologize, but I'm going to ask you to please send that out one more time, even though you've already sent it. I understand that, but
Okay, so I'm gonna leave the meeting. I don't need to be in this. I'll resend the 6:30 invite to everybody. It'll take me a minute to sign into Zoom and do that. And then before I leave, does everybody else have the estimated time of 7:31? Because I won't be back.
I do have that, I just didn't get the,
Okay, I will resend it momentarily. You guys all have a fabulous evening.
And do you mind not sending it as a calendar invite, because that doesn't work on our iPad, some of our iPads.
I will just send it within the text of an email. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Does that work? Okay.
yes.
Good night, everybody.
we'll see you in a little bit.
Night.
Thank you.